I'm really thrilled to be joining you today, and I really appreciate your staying with me because you're probably wondering exactly how this presentation fits with your day. And so I hope you'll just sit back a little bit and let me tell you about our market. But I first want to start with this quote because as marketers, it's on every single piece of educational collateral there is in our community. Mark Twain's quote about bigotry and how travel can really change the world is very important. And every educator or teacher that we work with often uses this quote. But I think what's really more important is that we spend most of our time promoting and advocating that kids need to travel. The United States is one of the only countries in the world where travel is not actually built into curriculum. German students, Italian students, Spanish students, Australians, all of them have 2 weeks to a month built into curriculum to travel. Here in the United States, we spend a lot of time just getting schools and school boards to let kids out of the classroom because they're so worried about test scores and they're worried about everything else. But I think we all know how important it is for kids to travel. And so I'm very passionate about it. I've been with the association about 11 years now, and we continue to grow. So when you use the word authentic, I wanted to let you know that I'm relatively new to speaking to this community because it's only been in the last 5 years that our members have been calling us with the challenges of traveling with GLBTQ students. And then more importantly, we've learned that there's over 200,000 let me say this the right way. 200,000 gender non-conforming students between the ages of 13 and 17 right now. And the numbers continue to grow. And the reason why it's important in our market, and I wanted to talk with you, is that we're often having a student register in September as a female student, but then in May, they may have transitioned to a male student, they may be binary. They're so fluid. And we're trying to travel with them and provide them with these safe experiences. And the destinations and the experiences are getting more and more important. So I think today what I'd like to do is introduce you and build awareness as marketers to the kind of experiences that can be provided in this market space and to pique your curiosity to potentially invest in this market. And I think the third most important thing is I think we're creating your future travelers. We're primarily working in a young market, and we know that when a student travels, and just think back, did you ever go on a trip in high school or that band trip? Did you get on a motor coach bus and you remember who you sat next to and where you went as a student? You want to bring your family back there when you're older. So we really feel like we're creating that next generation for you. I've got a PowerPoint with some research and data, but what I'd like to do is provide you with some highlights. And then there's a lot of data that I can share with you afterwards. So thank you again. I'm Carylann, and I'm glad to be here. SITA is the Student and Youth Travel Association. So we are essentially a trade association that represents 900 companies that work in this market. We have over 90 destinations and 50 international destinations that are members. So we represent a global community. We also have Teach and Travel, which represents about 100,000 teachers who identify as traveling teachers who want to be marketed to and are really our promoters. And then the SITA Youth Foundation, we provide over $100,000 a year in scholarships for underserved youth to travel. So that's the segment that we work in. In addition, we do student travel safety. We're a traditional trade association. As I mentioned, we have over 90 destinations that are with us. Now, why this market is important, it's 26% of all student travel. It is a huge market, and so it is one in which I think that many of us are spending and investing our dollars. But I want to talk a little bit in understanding the market segment because it really is broken into two segments. It's the 18 and older traveler. Many of the people that I meet with here at IPW when I have appointments are bringing in international students who are over 18. They typically are visiting universities, they want to do homestays, they stay J1 visas, that kind of market. SITA typically about 75% represents 18. So it's that 13 to 17-year-old who is traveling with a group, and they're traveling for educational purposes. And the reason why this is important is because educators and teachers really are the primary customers for us and for you to learn about. And they're traveling mostly for educational purposes. We're not talking about the spring break trip that we typically had to Fort Lauderdale. This is specifically, it has a purpose, primarily educational. And interesting enough, music performance is a huge segment as well. And that's just to give you an idea of the market segment. There's about 450 to 500 global educational travel companies that identify with this market. Many of them are small businesses, and most of them don't go to trade shows. So it's a little bit of a challenging market to reach because many of them, as I said, are working in their communities, they're working with their local schools, and many of them are reaching their customers through social media and the internet. Now, why do teachers organize travel? When we have the messaging that talks about the value of travel to educators and what your destination can bring to those students, that's how we reach them. So we spend a lot of time collecting data from teachers about what is important to them and the long-term benefits to their kids. And just as a note, teachers travel on their own time, and most of them pay for it themselves. So it's not something that the school is paying for, it's parents and teachers. So really it's a personal investment to them. We also did a lot of studies on the impact on the students themselves from travel. And so again, in our marketing, we use a lot of data on the long-term benefits. Kids who travel are more likely to stay in school. They're likely to build self-esteem. They turn out to be better students. And it really, most of them then go on to college. I just down when I talk to you a little bit about this community. Again, the 16-year-old is probably the largest segment in the marketplace right now, and they're very influential, as many of you know. And I really appreciated the sessions earlier today because all of that really applies to this market. When I talked about, and again, I'm learning many of the terms, our challenge is that this market, it's constantly changing. These students are ever evolving, and it's growing. And it really is important for us to provide them with these safe experiences, for them to feel that they can be a part of this inclusive travel experience. And it's new for us, and it's important. And I reach out to you to help guide us as we're talking with educators, how we can bring them into destinations where the students see themselves and they can really have a positive experience. Now, what we're doing also in the market is we are developing a standardization program for traveling students. And so what we're hoping to do is that when students see themselves in your marketing, they're more likely to want to travel. They're more likely to be inspired to become something else. But when I was looking at the marketing, families with kids is not student marketing. I go to a lot of sites and I don't actually see groups of students together. What I see are parents and kids on roller coasters. So most of the time you're marketing, I think, really to a family, but what you really hopefully will look at is the group market. Groups of students together reflective of today's school students. We also know that the kindergarten class in 2025, for the first time, white students will be in the minority by the time they graduate from high school. So the marketing has to work with this changing demographic of future travelers. So I just bring that up to you, that what we feel our role is to help, again, work with you to provide these experiences. We're also designing a rubric for the industry so that they'll be able to measure and look at what are the destinations, who are the companies and the brands that actually understand how to work with these kinds of students and that they can align themselves with. And we really have to start at the grassroots level when we're working with the classrooms and the teachers and the students. We also have to develop training programs for tour guides, tour managers, tour directors to help them understand your destination and how to bring out that authentic experience. And when you talk about authenticity, we designed, we thought a civil rights tour, and we created it as an isolated tour. It's very important that kids understand civil rights. But what we didn't do was integrate it into the whole fabric of the travel experience and the culture. So again, we can't have standalone product that doesn't speak to the entire class. It has to be something that feels real, that everybody can understand, and that it speaks to the students. And you've been talking about this with adults. We just transfer a lot of that same into that student group market as the kids are traveling. And I think something also that is important that we're hearing is that the students want to participate in a destination that has those opportunities to volunteer, to understand. For example, when we were at the Indian Museum in Smithsonian, they get down and they understand, they work with the textiles, they create together. They want very immersive experiences. And so if you have that to offer, these are great opportunities. And one other thing that's great about the student market, they're probably visiting more attractions of your members than the adults are. We're going to botanical gardens, we're going to zoos, we're visiting lots of different attractions that adults don't go to. When you bring in a meeting and a convention, they're not going to the local exhibits and the local opportunities like our students are. And one other factor, kids spend more money in a trip than adults do because their parents give them their credit cards as well as cash. So we know kids in New York City spend $1,500 in 3 days, whereas adults spend $700. So I'm just letting you know it is a relatively lucrative market. I'm not sure why the PowerPoint's coming out this way, but when I send it to you, it'll be fine from a marketing perspective. So I want to just go through this quickly. I just wanted to bring you some stats on domestic travel in terms of destinations. So typically right now when we look at going into 2020 pre-COVID, these are the destinations. And if you just look at them right now, you can understand it's typical because that's what educators know about. That's what we're marketing to them typically. Those are the destinations that have maybe the largest attractions. But what I think is really interesting for example, Cedar Rapids, Pigeon Forge, Gatlinburg, Memphis, smaller destinations, is that the kids are traveling on motor coaches across the country to get to these larger destinations. And so when we're marketing where they're going to stop, where they're going to spend the night, that's when we have an opportunity to bring in a lot of really great destinations along the way. So just maybe think regionally about, even though these are larger destinations, where are the kids traveling from? They're going to be on motor coaches. They might be flying in and getting on another coach. So it does require a little bit more work, but it really is, it's a great market and it can help be a really good volume business. A little bit more about the North American destinations that students are traveling to. Canada and the US, as many of you probably know, are the largest feeders for each other in terms of the number of students that cross back and forth the borders. So we do a lot of work in Canada as well. And then just showing you some, San Francisco, interesting, you say, is emerging. It's not a super friendly city for students and young people. So we're trying to make some of these destinations more welcoming for students to come into. And then from an international perspective, I wanted to share with you that the reason why international students come to the United States in this age group is primarily language and culture. If a student travels to the US as a high school student, they're more likely to get into a US college. And so a lot of the marketing that we're doing is tying in the fact that kids can come back here eventually for school. And that's a major factor. Whether you're a Chinese parent or a German parent, we all have the same, want the same opportunities for our kids. So these are the reasons why they're traveling. These are the cities, again, international students generally are flying in and they'll start in these major destinations, but again, they travel all across the country. They're spending up to 2 weeks, 10 days to 2 weeks with us when they come. And just a little bit of note, of course, since the pandemic, you can imagine we're just struggling to get kids back in school. But I think once that starts to even out, we had a lot of bookings for this fall, but the Delta variant has really impacted us. So we're anticipating that we'll be back up to probably at least 85% of our marketplace back in 2022, should we remain stable as it comes with COVID and the pandemic. And as parents really get back into school, they want their kids to travel. And we're seeing much more focus on the US and domestic. So I think there are some additional opportunities there as well. Just a quick note, how it's very important to have all your sites for COVID. Teachers and educators print off what you have on your website and attach it to the RFPs for them to travel. So all the information that is on your websites is very important for educators. That's where they go to find out whether or not what the requirements are and where to get information about your destination. So why should you look at this market? It's repeat. There's always going to be an 8th grade class. There's always going to be a 10th grade class. It's relationship oriented. Once you start working with a school and a destination, they want to go back to that destination because it's a new group of students all the time. And I want to say resilient because we are. After 9/11, we had a total dip, but it was student travel that was among the first to come back because, again, parents, teachers, educators, everyone believes in what we do. So I just want to thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to talk a little bit about this segment and to tie it back around to the LGBTQ community. It is really important that these kids feel safe where they travel to, what restrooms they can use, that they see themselves in your marketing, that they really feel that they can grow up to be part of our community. And that's really what we're passionate about. So thank you again for your time. And I don't know if there's time for questions or if anybody has any for me. I see a nodding head. Great, thank you. Any questions? Hi.
How rate sensitive do you find student groups to be?
That is a great question. So we put 4 kids to a room. And so they're still sleeping 4 to a room. I know that sounds crazy, but they are. And even with our gay and our transgender students, we are putting them 4 in a room. And so the rate sensitivity, we can move them into shoulder periods, but they pay the rates. I mean, if they want to be a cherry blossom in Washington, D.C., then they know the rooms downtown are going to be $300 a night. But what's really great about the student market is if you have limited service properties outside of the downtown, we fill those properties. And so by bringing in those communities, the hotel community all around you, we can fill those rooms, and I think it really benefits. The 3 things for us are the hotel, do you have a place for us to eat, and can we park the motor coach? Those are 3 important factors. Sure.
Could you talk a little bit more about the size of these groups? Is it several classes? Is it one?
It's a really great question, thank you. So if we think domestically, pre-COVID, it's 50 on a coach. So our goal is to put a minimum of 50, but I would say in general, it's 100 to 200 students in a general program that we're moving. When we're moving a marching band or a performance group, we can have up to 500. When you see the Macy's Day Parade, the Rose Bowl Parade, so there's a travel company that is moving that marching band. And just think of the dollars, 500 people times 4 nights, eating, sleeping, enjoying a destination. The family travels with the kids as well. So we have a lot of that component where the family is an add-on. So we'll have 200 adults traveling with 500 students as well. Yeah, it's a much bigger market. I was very surprised. I came from the meeting side, and it really is a lucrative market, and a lot of the destinations are really working with it right now. We typically think of it as really low rated, but I think you'll find that as you dig a little bit deeper and look at some of the research, it can really help build up revenue for your destinations. So, thank you.